Hey everyone, welcome to Whiteboard Ecology, where we're helping you learn ecology one lesson at a time. If you've been listening to our Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, a couple weeks ago we had a few episodes on deer and how they affect native plant populations here in the Northeast. In those episodes, I referenced how deer really like edge habitat, and Dr. J. Kelly did as well. Deer really thrive in edge habitat, but I referenced how I learned using this grid behind me how to really demonstrate how that edge habitat changes over time when humans get involved. So I'm going to go ahead and link those podcasts in the description below. So if you haven't listened, go ahead and listen. It really sheds a lot of light on why deer have become such a problem in the state of New Jersey, and really it's been a lot of our impacts, and then some of the things that we can do to gauge our habitat's health and rebound our habitat, or if we want to attract deer to the right areas, how we go ahead and do that. So this was how edge habitat was always explained to me. And edge habitat is really the edge of our forested areas. So this 10 by 10 grid represents a forested area. The blue squares around the perimeter represent our edge habitat. The white squares in the middle represent the interior of the forest. And as you probably can assume, different species prefer different areas. There's some species that really thrive on that edge. The edge has a lot of shrubs, a lot of herbaceous plants, a lot of flowers, fruits, and berries. That's where they really thrive. And there's species like deer, also like opossums, raccoons, hawks tend to like those areas. Field mice, that's why the hawks like to be there. They really thrive in those areas because there's a lot of food and cover and nesting areas and places they like to live. Where the interior isn't as hospitable to things like deer and opossums and squirrels because they don't have as much food, they don't have as much cover, there's not as much sunlight. That's why the plants are there, because there's so much sunlight, where the canopy in the interior is usually blocking out that sunlight. But there's different species that really like to live there. Things like salamanders require vernal pools. They really like those wet pools that form in the bottom of the forest. They're in deep shade. That's where they thrive. Timber rattlesnakes were historically present in the Northeast, and you can still find pockets of them, but they require that shaded interior under the canopy of the forest. Scarlet tanagers are a rare bird species that they're one of the forest songbirds. They need that interior forest, and they don't thrive in those exterior edges. And as I mentioned, deer have become a problem in New Jersey because we've created so much edge habitat as humans. We want to build roads, we want to build houses, and oftentimes there's some of this interior forest in the way. So let's go ahead and I'll demonstrate here. This is a 100 grid square. The perimeter makes up 34 of those squares. So the edge habitat right now is 34 squares. The interior is the remaining 66 squares. So right now there's about 2/3 of this grid is in the interior, 1/3 is the perimeter. And I'll show you how quickly that changes as humans get involved. So first, we're going to go and build a road right down the middle of this habitat. So we didn't just lose the 8 interior squares and 2 edge squares. We also created 16 new edge squares along that road that displaced the 16 interior squares that were there already. So just in that maneuver, we lost 24 interior squares and created 14 new edge squares when we only lost 10 squares of habitat total. And this happens all the time. We wanted to get from point A to point B. We build a road in between. We displaced the forest that was there, and we really altered the habitat in more ways than one. Not just because we created edge habitat, but if I'm a salamander and my vernal pool was here and my girlfriend's vernal pool was over here, in a lot of cases, the salamander can't cross this, at least not safely anymore. And that's sometimes why you'll see frogs and salamanders and things crossing the road, especially on wet nights, is because they're instinctually, they want to do that, but they're really literally playing Frogger as they go across with all the traffic that's now coming down this road. And we lose a lot of animals because of roadkill along roads, because they're trying to make that historic migration to where they would want to mate. Or to where they would want to live at certain times of the year. We've made that really hard for them to do. So we've already caused a problem there. We've created all this new edge habitat, which in itself, there's animals that like edge habitat, but we've lost so much of the interior. But say now we want to build a couple houses. This guy's gonna have a really long driveway here. He wants a big house with a long driveway, and we're gonna build another house over here. And say we want to do something nice for the community, and we're gonna build a park in between. And at face value, this doesn't look like it did that much, but just how we built the road, even though we've gotten rid of some edge habitat, in this case, we only got rid of edge habitat, except that we've created all new edge habitat surrounding that property. So on the park, now we've actually created another interruption. If anything wanted to get from here to here, now it's going to be really difficult for them to do so. And we really fragmented that ecosystem even more just by building, in this case, 2 houses and a big park where we're mowing and we're creating edge habitat. So now we fragmented even more. And this side, this is where I wanted to really illustrate, we've lost so much of that interior habitat. This is still a continuous piece of interior habitat. We need to keep that. We need to treasure this. It would be really easy to come in here and build another road or build houses all along the perimeter of it. But every house, even though if it's built here, now we're pushing that edge habitat further in. And that becomes a big problem for all those species like the salamanders and the rattlesnakes and the birds, the forest songbirds. They no longer have a place to live. Sometimes this area, like in this case, that area might have gotten too small. They don't have enough enough of a range for them to carry out their normal life cycle. It might just be too small or not large enough for them to have a sizable population to keep breeding. And there might be inbreeding going on. And you start to lose those populations because we fragmented them and made their range so small, the places they can live so small. We've already fragmented this quite a bit, and we've lost so much of that interior habitat. Actually, you have, 16 squares here, and 23, 24, 25. So we've only lost 10 squares here, 14, 15, 16 squares. We only lost 16 of those original 100 squares, but now we have so few squares of interior habitat left. We used to have 64. We only lost 16 total squares, but we're only left with in the mid-20s of this interior habitat, and that's really because we just preserved this side. This is makes up the bulk of it. So, and it really only takes a little bit more development to lose, even though we'll still have plenty of trees, plenty of what we consider the woods. We've lost all of that interior habitat, which means we've lost a ton of diversity. Another threat is traditionally in our landscapes, in our parks and around our houses and around strip malls and those kind of things, we're not just planting non-native plants, but a lot of times we're planting things like Japanese barberry, which tend to be all invasive. And a lot of times those plants, so these plants is front landscape and some invasives, and those seeds, they kind of get eaten by birds or they blow in. And now they're starting to get in this edge habitat a little bit. And next thing you know, they're taken up. And if you drive along most roads, especially in this area of New Jersey, you see, if you know your plants, you'll notice a lot of those species are not native species. They're actually invasive species, things like tree of heaven and Japanese barberry and calorie pear is a big one I did a video on prior to this. And what you'll see is, especially things like Bradford pear, they'll actually encroach even further and get into this interior habitat somewhat, which even puts more pressure on our native interior species, those forest songbirds. Well, now they have even less habitat because maybe that Japanese barberry, that invasive plant, is crowding out what they would normally use for food, and what they would eat for food is no longer there. Or what they would roost in is getting pressured, and the new saplings aren't coming up, and as that tree dies, there's nothing there to replace it. So that's why it's so critical we preserve these areas of interior forest as much as we can and try not to fragment them. We don't want to build a road through the middle of this because we don't just lose where that road went, but we're creating more edge habitat. We fragmented that ecosystem, and eventually you fragment it to a point where those populations can no longer survive. And we're at a place where we're losing more species really year by year, probably even day by day. We're just putting so much pressure on these species that we're at risk of losing 1 million species in the next 100 years or so. So that's why it's so important to preserve these interior forests. Even though, like I mentioned before, the edge habitat, it's great habitat for a lot of game species and things that we see quite often. And just because it's interior, we don't see those interior species, but we're going to lose so much diversity if we don't preserve these interiors. So thank you guys for watching. I'm Tom Konezik. Don't forget to click like and subscribe below, especially if you want to see more of these videos. We really appreciate it. So thank you very much.